since the past 3 months. I'm just covering the past 3 months updates. But China does have heaps of actually. And when it comes to AI, the common misconception is that the EU has the strictest regulation. It's not. China has the strictest AI regulations, but they're still innovating very well. So it sort of defeats the whole regulation stifles innovation myth. You have to actually get approval to release a generative AI system to the public. You have to get regulated approval. The EU doesn't have that regime. US doesn't have that. UK doesn't have that. Australia doesn't have that. But China is still arguably now like #1 in AI in some respects. So yeah, again, all the details are on the tracker. Yeah. In interest of time, we'll move on. Yeah, like take a 1 minute break, and then or move on to
answer question. 1 minute break.
I'm just conscious of.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Let's take another 1 minute break, and we'll get back to you.
Make sure you have enough time.
This is yours? Yeah. That was a great update.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't know that about China.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea, but I've had my strong suspicion.
Yeah, it's heavily regulated.
So interesting. I reckon. I mean, no. You know what? I'm not going to put a thought in your head. Why are they beating you?
I think it's just the talent.
Yeah.
It's just the talent. And the support, the government support, industry support. They've got the capital. They've got everything that's needed. Actually, it's just culture. Top-down culture. Yeah. When the government says do this, everyone falls in line. Yeah. There's like no complaints. Not that they might have, but like everyone just. There's also a very strong national building culture. Like we've been like school for 100 years. Let's build, and that. And like the actual AI researchers' talent, they're like the cream of the crop, right? China every year, 23 million students take the exam. Only 40% go to uni. That 40% they compete to get to the top job. So
another one
around the corner. To the top job. So that 5% is way next level compared to 5% in America. It's like it's next level, really next level. Yeah. Like we're talking about like I don't know. Like Zuckerberg is like probably average, like in terms of like skill. Yeah, like it's everyone's like Zuckerberg times 2 intelligence. Whoever the big tech geniuses are, but that's just the average employee. Now imagine a group of them working on the same problem. AI is very mathematical. Like, math has always been a big thing. They're always cracking these math problems. These innovations right now are more about the software, less about the hardware, because China can't really access a lot of that hardware. So they're really forcing themselves, like efficiency, new ways of calculating. It's a very math problem, and you just can't compete against China in math.
Well, they made the right strategic decision.
Oh yeah. And the system allows for it. Allows for it.
Right.
The next best will be Singapore.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
And Dubai, like UAE. For Australia, US, UK, like it's possible, but it just relies more on private investment. Way harder for Australia because the private sector is as big as US.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we had this. Anyway, so I will go on. But,
yeah, sure.
But we should catch up for a coffee. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Do you want to fill that up?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Read it, yes.
All right.
At the beginning,
Yeah.
I'm just going to give like a 30-second anecdote from the rock.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hop on stage.
Yes.
I've got this.
Cool. Look this. I got this.
Oh, yes,
Good, because the
great.
problem was last time I left it down here.
I couldn't see anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just put on your board. But it's okay. We only went 4 minutes over time, so it was really fine. And now we're at the end. Oh, that's all right. We can get started.
That's right.
That's all right. We can get started. They'll know. All right. All right. I'm gonna. Oh, here you go. So you can feel. All right. All right. We are back. We promised you that we would do this like a crime fiction. So we started at the end, and we're coming back to the beginning. But before we get into that,
Whilst everyone takes their seats, just to give everyone another 30 seconds or so, the grok question before triggered a recent memory I'd had, and it was a real awkward point as an author. So back in my 20s, before we decided to write non-fiction, I had set out to write this gothic horror novel, and I thought I was being really edgy by using like really expressive language and every explicit word that I could think of. And then a couple of months ago, I asked Grok to write an insulting letter to a friend of mine. And I read the letter and I just thought, oh my God, this is like the first page of that novel I wrote when I was 24. And it was an existential moment as a writer. So now whenever I hear grok, I always have like a love-hate reaction.
I mean, it is a very, it definitely says what it means to say, grok.
True,
and
true.
I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's a unique selling proposition for grok.
All right, so now we are going to the dead zone. Mm-hmm. We're going to tell you how to survive the dead zone, which doesn't sound very nice at all, but that's why we're going to tell you how to survive it.
So, the dead zone is a term that we've heard from some startup founders, and it refers to that period of time where you, as a founder, have committed to your business. You've quit your job, perhaps you've raised some capital, maybe you've put some of your own money into the startup. So you are fully committed, but you are not generating any revenue yet.
You're pre-revenue.
That's right. So you have now established beyond a shadow of a doubt that your startup is going to fail, but you also feel like you've committed enough where failure actually means something. It is one of the worst places for a startup to fail.
And here in Australia, we need to live in that space because we don't live in the land of $100 million checks.
No.
We do see there's a lot of exciting things happening in the AI world, and there's glittering money somewhere, but how did these people survive that little period? Well, we talked about a name. What's in a name?
Mm-hmm.
A rose by any other name? Center for AI Standards, AI Safety. What's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
These are the people who realize there's a really big difference.
So the two examples you see here, firstly, told you, not everyone we're going to showcase looks like me. Diversity! But beyond that, they have a number of really important distinctions between the two. These two startups, Forage and Like Family, they both found themselves in the dead zone and they both made it out the other side. And for both of them, it reflected something completely different. Now, as Wenee said, for Like Family, the issue they faced that plunged them into the dead zone was a name. That seems like a really strange thing to highlight as an issue. When we're talking about AI and bleeding edge technology, isn't a name just some branding issue that you can finalize once you have 100,000 users? Well, in the case of Like Family, it almost ruined their business. So let's step back a second. When Like Family first launched, it was called Home Care Heroes, and it stemmed from a very, very personal urge. Jenna and Matt, showcased there, the two founders, they had brought Matt's parents to Australia from Canada. Matt's parents were elderly and they required a lot of care. Jenna and Matt, they were young, they were full-time employees, and whenever they had spare time, they would care for Matt's parents. But there were huge swathes of the day where they just couldn't be there for them, and they'd have these heartbreaking situations where a store clerk would call them and say, "Hey, I found your father wandering down the street."
So enter another well-named person, Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
A woman called Destiny walked into their lives and said, "Hey, I'm pretty free. I'll take your parents out for a coffee. I'll take them to the beach." And this just started sort of organically happening. They became friends.
They did.
Which is so nice. It's almost like family, which is not the first thing they thought, because they thought, oh, well, I'm providing home care. She's helping with home care. They're home care heroes.
So, Jenna and Matt, they approached it as classic sellers would. They kind of did what we saw from Alexis earlier with his startup Mad Paws, where they built a robust business model. They thought, how can we scale destinies to the entire nation and beyond? So they looked at other business models. They looked at your Airbnbs, your Airtaskers, your freelancers, your Mad Paws, and they thought, how can we create a double-sided marketplace for this kind of service? They also identified all other kinds of hurdles like insurance, which certainly isn't very sexy, but could be a killer for a business like theirs. They did everything right and they found some fantastic carers. but they still weren't getting traction.
Yes, they didn't have the ever-elusive product market fit. People didn't really know what they were about. They kind of thought, oh, you're gonna come around and like help provide nursing care or something like that.
It was also strange because they found that when people did book through their platform, they really, really enjoyed it. So it was clear that what they were offering actually resonated with the people that needed it. It was just an issue connecting with those people. So they hit the ground. They started attending industry events. And when they were there, they spoke to all kinds of people, industry representatives, people who might need their care, people who maybe grappled with disabilities or were elderly. And they would say variations of, look, we love what you're doing, but we already have home care. We have nurses who come to take care of us. I have a physio who comes to visit. I have someone who comes and cleans. And they say, no, that's not what we're doing. We're connecting you with someone who can be like family to you, take you out for the day, show you a good time, be a friend. And they said, oh my God, that sounds great. I would love that.
And so they thought about it deeply. They thought about it deeply the way that humans need to think and create and make connections, and thought, well, maybe that's the name, right? And of course, a lot of other things happened to them. They got into the Remarkable Accelerator, so it's a startup accelerator specifically for these kind of social interest, social justice kind of driven startups. And they got a little bit of funding from that, a little bit. But like many startups in our part of the world, and in New Zealand, obviously, they needed to show that customers would pay for what they did, so they did show that. But let's have a look at this handsome dude standing in front of a founder's sign. He's got a little prize. What is his deal? His name is Pasha Rayan. He and his co-founder Tom Brunskill are graduates out of the UNSW Founders 10X Accelerator program. But by their own admission, when we had a chat to Pasha, when they went through the 10X Accelerator program, they were kind of a bit of a joke.
In fact, you see here that Pasha has won a startup award, but when they were passing through this accelerator, they'd won another unofficial kind of award, which was the early startup that had changed its idea the highest number of times. Now, they were the complete opposite to Like Family. They knew what they wanted to do. They were students, and they knew that they wanted to solve student problems. And the student problem that they wanted to solve was getting people into the workforce, getting them started on their career. Now, if you've ever spoken to an undergrad student or a grad who is nearing the end of their course, we don't need to tell you that this is going to be a very sticky product.
And they did the right thing. They did the Alexis version of going to the dog park. They talked to 600 students, which is a lot of students. And students all said, yeah, we like, I guess we want mentoring, like, 'cause that's how you get the job, right? And therein lay the assumption. They said, oh, they want mentoring. They went off, they built a mentoring platform. The mentors were there, the students were there, but it just wasn't really working.
No, it wasn't. They found that the students were disengaging from their mentorships after a couple of sessions. And the mentors, they just didn't really know how to show up for the students because they didn't know what the students wanted. So again, it was the antithesis to Like Family. Like Family, they found that when people used the service, they kept using it. Whereas Forage, they kept seeing this drop off and they couldn't identify why until they decided to return to those 600 students and keep asking questions. And in doing so, they discovered that the reason that all of these students had gravitated towards the idea of a mentoring program wasn't because they were looking for mentors. They saw mentors as a way to get their foot in the door for a job. And they thought, okay,
so they wanted
jobs. How can we address that then? We can't just hand out jobs, but how can we create a bridge that will connect these students to the workforce?
Absolutely. And so Pasha Rayan and Tom Brunskill, they weren't from the classic private school, selective school thing that we see in Sydney. Pasha Rayan was from a good school, but single mother, didn't feel like he had the same ways in. Tom Brunskill was a country boy. They came to UNSW, they didn't even realise that internships and clerkships and all that existed. And through that whole process, they were really, it was part of them that was a bit affronted. Like, why can't this go to more